Hey everyone, thank you for sharing part of your afternoon with us. Welcome to Skillup. My name is Ross Mike and I'm an account executive.
My name is Caleb Malik. I'm an account executive turned marketing director. Here on the show, we talk with individual contributors, those folks who are carrying the bag every single day. You're going to hear an actionable tactic here in the beginning, and then we're going to talk about some career wisdom that you can use to grow your career going into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we have Brendan, and Brendan is going to teach us about the things he thought he knew when heading into his first sales job. And then we're going to explore his background a bit to uncover some career wisdom from some of the things he's learned from starting out in door-to-door sales, then going into B2C, and then now in the B2B realm. I anticipate there's lots of great wisdom here. Brendan, thank you for joining us. How are we doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
We'll waste no time and jump right in.
Yeah. Going into sales, and it's kind of like, I hope I'm not messing with your format too much, but it has to do like how I got into sales was kind of like I tripped, I stumbled, I tried to avoid it at all costs, and it sucked me right back in. So I had all these ideas of what I thought worked and didn't work in sales, right? Like I thought cold calling was dead. I grew up the son of a union carpenter, right? Like business sales was not a thing that we talked about in the household. When it did come up, it was because some silly telemarketer was interrupting dinner, right? And what I've learned over time is that like it's not that I hated telemarketers. It just I was really bothered, and my family was bothered by poorly executed telemarketing, right? Since then, I've made a lot of money banging the phone, dialing a lot of numbers, interrupting people's days, busy people, and finding a way for them to get excited about that interruption and then thank you by signing a check, right? Like,
So how do you, what's your way of, if you call me during the day and I'm picking it up, maybe I'm a little bit annoyed, you're interrupting my day. Like, what do you do to get me on your side? Like, what's your kind of moves? What are your tactics there?
Yeah. So, my philosophy, and I think I stole this from Keenan, right? Show up, solve a problem, or get the heck out, right? Like, or go away, right?
He doesn't say heck, but yeah.
Yeah, he probably uses much shorter words, 4-letter words. But you don't start a cold call the way you think a cold call starts, right? You start a cold call like you're calling your grandma, right? Like, how do you greet grandma? Hey, grandma, it's Brendan. How's it going? Right? Like, that's how I start a cold call, right? Just like you're calling somebody friendly who should be excited to talk to you on the phone, right? So breaking the ice, how's your day going? Crack a joke. If I can get them to laugh, like, cool, I got another 30 seconds. We're going to do all right. Right? And through that, then I'm looking for a yes, no. If I can get them with my hook, depending on what I'm selling, right? It's usually I present an ideal outcome, right? An ideal reality that they're not experiencing now, and I'm like, you'd be interested in something like that, right? Or you want to take a look at a solution that could get you there, right? And if they say yes, awesome, let's book a meeting, right? Because I want now my discovery that they're going to have planned around it, right? So like it's like dating, right? If I meet a girl and I skip to one night stand rather than settling for the phone number and calling her up in 3 days and asking her to dinner, that relationship probably isn't going to last very long. Right. Whereas if I take my time and hit these milestones in an appropriate clip, rapport is going to be established, a relationship is going to be established. They're going to be more trusting when I do have deep dive questions that they don't just let anybody ask. They're actually going to give me an answer to. To tie it all the way back to a cold call, right? I start a cold call the same way I start a call to a loved relative by, hey, how's it going? Let's crack a joke, then we'll get down to business. But like nobody cares. Like I was working with a company that was selling CRMs for a while, and the thing I said every week is nobody wants a new CRM. Nobody cares. They've got one. They think they're good, but everybody, and our CRM was for nonprofits raising money, but everybody wants to raise more money. And that's how we get them every time. I said this so much that my 6-year-old son would repeat it to me at the lunch table during COVID, and we were all home and everything. So he was hearing me make these cold calls, and he would repeat that to me. He's like, "Dad, nobody cares about these CRMs, but everybody wants to raise more money, and that's how we get them."
Marquise because everybody
raising
wants more money. That's an important lesson in life.
Yeah.
Raising a sales professional from the home there. I was gonna say, so I love your approach of that upward inflection, like, hey Brendan, this is Ross, how you been? Because it implies to the other person that, hey, I know this person. And 9 times out of 10, they're gonna go, oh, I'm sorry, who's this? And then you've already done that pattern interrupt. And then to your point, using some sort of humor, like, hey Brendan, this call is, we haven't spoken before. So it's gonna be like a craft beer. Smooth, refreshing, and ice cold, right? Like using some sort of humor, and I did not come up with that for all the listeners out there. I can drop in the show notes. I'm blanking on his name, but John Selig, actually, a comedian for sales. But like to your point, I love that, like inserting some humor at the front. So some good action
I'm
tips
also
there.
like, I'm a big fan of scripts. I write my own and I have it up on my screen. Like I've got 2 screens going, right? I've got my CRM and my script on one and my calendar on the other. Right. So like I'm reading a script every time I connect. Right. Yeah. And I'm working this like the scientific method. So there's another, inside baseball tip for you. It shouldn't be your first time having this conversation. You're a professional. You should have this conversation more than the person on the other end of the line. And because of that, because you're a professional, you should be able to lead them through the conversation. Take leadership, be a leader through this buyer's journey. Even, and sometimes leadership means, hey man, you're disqualified. Like this isn't going to work for you. Like, let's not waste our time. But if it is a solution that's going to work, like, hey man, so the next step is you sign on the dotted line and we make all your dreams come true.
One of the things that I was curious about, Brendan, is, to kind of go back a little bit, you've talked about, here's how I get people interested when I call them. Here's how I get them on my side. One of the things you said is I call because I'm there to fix a problem. In terms of that, do you typically, what does that look like? Is that like, I really understand our value proposition for somebody like you, and so I can communicate that to you and how I'm going to help you solve a problem that I think you have? Or are you doing some like kind of background research and you're like, hey, this company, I think what they have going on right now specific to them is like, how do you position that, I guess, when you make that?
Yeah. So, having call recordings is huge. Like if you're coming into an organization where that's available to you, download them, get them, listen to them on 2x speed on your drive home, right? Just be available to that information, and like by consuming those conversations, you'll start connecting some of the dots, right? Because logic is a really great place to start, right? For like what I'm doing now, right? Like no matter what you sell, if it's a great product great product or service that actually solves somebody's problem, the people for who it solves a problem, they're experiencing a very similar thing. And there's enough of them apparently to build a whole business around it, right? So, if you are a brand new SDR, right, and this is a bigger organization and you're not in a startup world, like there should be sources for this information, right? You probably have leaders who are going to tell you, hey, go after this person. This is what they care about. This is how we solve that problem, and do it. I was talking with actually one of my cousins who's like in his first sales gig, and he's selling something that is sold very basically he's selling insurance and annuities and things, and stuff that
commodities
have a need for, right? Something that can be very commoditized, right? And I was telling him, I'm like, dude, just keep picking up the phone, man. Just like right now it's a volume game until you get it figured out, right? Like learn as much as you possibly can from your leaders, from the top performers in your circle. Steal everything that you can from them, like in terms of tactics and what works, what doesn't, and who to go after. Because like not only is there an ideal client persona for the company, like there's probably an even smaller one for you as an individual, right? As a contributor on that team. And it's going to take you repetition to figure out who it is, what is my hook for that segment of the market, and where do they hang out? Where does that hook work like magic? What is the fishing hole that is just going to work like gangbusters in? And by the time you find it, and it could, I've had to start and restart a couple of times in my career, and by the time you find it, it's going to be frustratingly obvious because you've done all this work and you've talked to all these people and you fully understand the market and where your thing fits in the market and how your customers live in that market. It's going to be so obvious but it's only going to be obvious because you've done all that work.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I feel like a lot of younger reps, they want to reinvent the wheel, and they feel like they need to be like the genius that figures it out, and they feel like they need to, and like you're like steal, like go and figure out what the best like performers are doing and steal. And like steal sounds bad, but it's not. It's just like model the behavior that's working. Like, why are you trying to like bang your head against the wall? And it reminds me, like leaving school, my first like about to be job was a sales role, and I got set up, and I was feeling like I was hot shit, and I'm like talking to people on the team, and oh well, what's it like, blah, blah, blah. And the hiring manager said to me after I talked to people, why didn't you ask any of them like what you needed to do to get this job? Like, why didn't you ask basically like they could have told you what you needed to do. Why didn't you ask? I was like, oh, I didn't want to cheat, basically. And he was like, no, in sales, like you need to just like replicate. You need to replicate the things that you're supposed to do. You need to be asking people around you. And it was like a lesson for me. Like, didn't get the job because I didn't do that, And so I think that that's just something that like people have been doing sales for a long time realize, like, don't recreate the wheel, just replicate what's working really well.
Yeah.
You mentioned your cousin who's starting out, first sales role. You work with a lot of younger professionals, just generally. I know some of the work you do around Phoenix, and then you've been an SDR manager. You've done these sorts of things. What are some of the mistakes that you see younger reps making? Like, what are the typical problems that you see where you're like, they just don't get it, and they need to have 2 years of experience to get it? Like, what is that?
Well, I'd say like, yeah, trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, yes, you should be like taking in information from everywhere, but like part of the job is doing the job. Like, you need the reps. Like, just pick up the phone, talk to people. Yes, you're going to talk to a bunch of the wrong people. You're going to say a bunch of the wrong things. People won't do business with you because you put your foot in your mouth. But it's like, you got to get through it, man. Like, you're not going to be a black belt SDR in year one. It's like, you could do really well, but like straight out of the gate, like you're not going to be a prodigy. Just assume that like it's you're average, right? Do all the things, have high expectations, work your butt off, but like you can't logic your way through it, right? Part of like what we were just talking about earlier, like when you figure out what your hook is and where the perfect place to fish with that hook is, it's going to be super obvious. But like you're going to look back and you'd be like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have been able to logic my way there in a million years. But it will be so obvious, right? Once you've done it, once you have that perspective. But like starting out, you don't have enough data to get your way through logic. Like you're putting together any logic you try to assemble is going to be built on fallacies because you don't truly understand where you are.
That's good. It's like you basically you need to be willing to fail. You need to be willing to try new things, and don't prepare for a whole one more day of preparation and then I'll start making calls. One more day of It's like, no, get out there, start doing it. Like you're gonna screw up like everybody did in the beginning. Like just figure it out.
Well, yeah, like those early tricks, it can feel like trying to eat an elephant, but like how do you eat an elephant, right? A bite at a time, right? So like, get your Pomodoro clock out, right? Your little egg timer or tomato timer, set it for 25 minutes. Try to, depending on what if you're just phone, in 25 minutes, you might be able to make 20 dials in, if you're using phone and sending your cadence is phone and email right away. Maybe you're making, 10 in a half hour, right? Chase the numbers, right? Because it's going to give you the repetitions. And like, I don't make 100 dials a day, right? Like there's a lot of situations where I did make 100 dials a day, and then I was down to 50 dials a day. And now like with my audience and my process, like if I make 40 dials in a day, I'm booking 4 appointments and 3 of them are going to show up and I'm going to be able to quote 1, right? Like, you just need to get the volume up. Like, and it totally blew my mind because back when I was making 100 dials a day, there was a guy who sat on the other side of the room who'd make 10 and book 2 meetings every day.
And you're like, how does he do that?
Yeah. It's like he had I didn't even have the perspective to understand the nuance and what he was doing. I was trying to listen to his calls. I'm like, how? You're missing so much of it because you haven't been in it. Like, I grew up wrestling. As I got older, I got into jiu-jitsu, and there's these dudes who study it for decades, right? And it's like, they're not in shape, they're in their 50s, and like they've, they got a brown belt or a black belt now, and like in no effort, they're getting you to tap out. It's because they're seeing with a totally different set of eyes, because they've been where you've been, and they have all this repetition and context since then.
And so is it just being okay with failure to get to that point? Like being okay with trying new things and like failing forward? Is that how you get to that point in your career where you can make 10 dials a day and book 2 meetings and be done?
Yeah, I'm still not there, and that guy drives me crazy to this day. I mean, you gotta be receptive to new ideas, right? You gotta keep asking questions, keep questioning how you're doing it. But at a certain point, like you have to do, like, you go through these phases, right, of doing and learning and doing and learning, and you're gonna see these, spikes and plateaus of your career, of your productivity. So yeah, you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to look like an idiot and laugh your way through it. And just like you start a cold call, like, this is the most awkward thing in the world. But like, if I can get you to laugh, and if I could laugh, and sometimes all it takes is laughing at myself, right? Like, the world isn't going to end, right? Like, they're going to hang up that phone. Chances are you could bump them out for a call back in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. They're not even going to remember you. And if they say no to the meeting, maybe their boss will say yes to the meeting. I've been in a lot of those where, number 2 on the team hangs up the phone and maybe says a couple of F words. A week later, I call his boss. He books the meeting on the spot, and then that person who's hung up the phone on me has to sit in that meeting. Be appreciative
and feel bad that they didn't get to say it was their idea.
Yeah, sometimes they feel bad, and sometimes they don't even remember. They were just like in a bad spot that day. We're too busy. It's like, this is the 5th call that I didn't ask for. Like, I got to get this stuff done, and they don't remember you. So it's like, it's just like it takes so many little, like it takes many drops to fill a bucket with water, right? Deals are won and lost through the accumulation of little things, right? No one thing typically, it has to be a really big thing, but those are few and far between. It's no one thing is going to lose you a deal, and no one thing is going to win you a deal, right? It's just these little nudges, and the accumulation, either positive or negative, is what swings the pendulum.
Yeah. One of the things that I've heard during our conversation from you today, without actually using the word, is like ego. Like, I don't hear any ego from you. It's like, laugh at yourself, like, get that other person to laugh. Like, it's not the end of the world if you screw something up, right? And I think some people can get like really locked up in their own ego of like, every call has to be perfect. I don't want to, whatever. And it makes me think of the CEO, one of the CEOs I worked for, who, I made some joke about his Halloween costume or something to a client, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you want me to should I show up to the call wearing that? Like, just like, totally, he's like, if you want me to do it, I'll do it. This guy's worth like tens of millions of dollars and is just like crushing it, massive growth in his company. He's like, I'll show up in a ridiculous Halloween costume if you think it'll make them laugh and like win us the deal. Like, I don't know, you know what I mean? So like, having that attitude, I think, is really important if you want to be like a top performer. So anyway, one of the things that I wanted to make sure we got into today is that I think is really unique to you is your work in the Phoenix community, like working with young professionals. Like, you're really out there networking, and you've definitely dove into that. I'm just curious to hear about like how you kind of like your mindset about that, the fruits of that labor. Just hear you talk about that, because a lot of people don't go in, as hard as you do on building that community and those relationships.
So right now, I think what you're referring to is I'm the marketing chair for Get Phoenix Young Professionals here in the Valley. And so, yeah, it's kind of like the networking event. It's, totally run grassroots by young professionals. Usually these groups are like part of a chamber. We started as part of the Scottsdale Chamber, spun off like 15, 16 years ago, and now we're our own thing. But being out in the community, like I'm hardcore. Like I love the efficiency of inside sales, right? And I think part of it was like I worked in factories and on assembly lines, and like that efficiency, like there's a huge value in how many people I can connect with via the phone and email in a day by staying in one spot versus maybe connecting with 3 people by driving, all around Phoenix in an afternoon, right? But still, like, Yeah, I mean, Get has an event every month. I've got board meetings and committee meetings between each of those events. I've got little things that I got to do. But being out, networking, like getting exposed to different ideas, different people. I think Ross and I met for the first time was it the Inside Sales Organization?
Yeah, it was an inside sales. Yeah, it was like a meetup.
Yeah.
Yep, AISP. Yep.
Which like died in Phoenix and has been revived, maybe, kind of. I'm not sure. COVID may have killed it again. But like, you just get exposed to so many different people, so many different ideas. That exposure to new ideas, like, and being involved in something outside of work, right? Like, that's where the creativity comes from. Like, it's hard if you don't have any outside influences to get better at what you're doing just by doing it, right? Like, you have to do it. And for most people, that's the biggest mistake, is they're just not doing it. They think they're working, but they're not really working, right? Like, they're not putting in as much effort, as much, between 9 and 5 as they should be, as they could be, and they're kidding themselves. So really, they just need to get exposed to people who are actually doing the work and like see, oh, the bar is actually here. I thought it was here, but the bar is here. So, right, so that can happen from being out in the community, getting involved, but also, like, Get has this community impact and like service orientation, right? Every quarter, one of the events is like a service project where we're organizing donations for a nonprofit, whether it's clothing donations, or this quarter we're going to United Food Bank and helping organize the food donations to give out to families. And that's been a huge positive influence on me. Like, I grew up the son of a union carpenter. My dad was from Ireland. Like, it was very immigrant, like, survival mentality, like giving, service, donations, like fundraising. Like, that wasn't a muscle that we worked out as a family very frequently. But this group of people, not only have they introduced me to new ideas that have helped me grow professionally, but like in this area of like community impact is been a huge area of growth. And, through trying to, like, I have a lot of skills in getting in front of people and getting them to spend money. And now I can use that, positively to impact my community through, some of these other initiatives. So, I mean, it can help you personally, it can help you professionally. You gotta find these things that give you energy, and being involved in that way is something that gives me energy, so that I can come back to work, I can go back home and, be the best version of myself professionally, personally, in front of the wife, what have you.
Well, it's awesome. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's great that you do it both for yourself personally, but for the community personally, professionally. And I know that there's a lot of younger professionals, people just starting out, that have learned a lot from you and from that organization, and from all of the kind of marketing efforts that you've done through that. And so I think it's fantastic. Ross, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think that there's a really good lesson there for people who are just starting out in their career in sales. If you don't have a lot of like hobbies, outside of your day job, finding local communities like that can give you that sense of fulfillment from, like the side of like donating time and helping others, but also like Brendan said, allowing you to network and find your tribe of, hey, here's how hard people are actually working, helping you identify, like, maybe aspiring to where you want to get to someday. Maybe as an SDR, you're in that community and you're sitting down across the table from a director of sales. And then all of a sudden you get that exposure through communities like that. So I think that's a really good takeaway.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you so much for being on today. What you have shared has been invaluable for us, for anybody listening, but especially for those folks that are kind of our core listeners, the younger early on SDRs and sales folks. And there just was a lot of really great advice, so thank you for that. Where should people connect with you if they're looking for you?
So LinkedIn is a great spot. So I'm Brendan Allen Barrett on LinkedIn. I've got a blog I haven't published in a little while. Start in Phoenix, so start in phx.com is a good place. Or if you want to check out Get, we're back to in-person events, so you can check out getphoenix.org. Join us for an event, hit me up. I can get you in for free. I know a guy. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. We appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, guys.